You're listening to Fulfilling Career, Happy Life, the podcast for accomplished professionals who want to identify what's next in their career and make it happen without compromising what matters most. I'm your host, Randi Roberts, an executive and career life coach, and I'm glad you're here. If you want to feel more energized about your work again, this show is for you. So let's get into it. This season, we've already covered a number of somewhat related topics around telling your own story, advocating for yourself, negotiating. There's another topic that fits in that theme that I'm so excited about, and that is around imposter syndrome. This is a word that you hear thrown around a lot. I hear it brought up by clients, accomplished leaders, more often than you might think. So I thought it was an important topic for us to dig into today. So I'm really excited about my conversation with Michelle Pollack. Michelle's a leadership coach and creator of the Art of Compassionate Command, which I know you'll all want to hear more about. She's got all kinds of coaching certifications from all kinds of cool places. But the thing that I think about with Michelle is that she works with high achieving, mostly women, to help them get out of their own way and empower themselves to lead and live their lives on their own terms. And she does a lot of speaking. She does a lot of workshop facilitation. So when it came to imposter syndrome, I knew Michelle had to join us. So I'm really, really happy to have you with us today, Michelle.
I'm so excited to be here, Randi. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Is there anything else that you want our listeners to know about you before we dive into the questions?
I think you covered it professionally. I'm a mom. I do some writing. I have 2 girls, and I'm married to a writer as well. And I work with all different kinds of people. I think the one thing that I would add is my view of leadership is one that is the idea that really we're all made to be leaders if we choose that in our lives. Parenting is leadership. Teaching is leadership. It's not just, confined to the idea of CEOs, executives, and, people who are in those positions that you might normally think of as leaders.
That's great. I'm glad you mentioned that. I'm glad you shared about your own experience, but also leading or the other parts of your life, if you will, and leading into how that manifests to leadership, because it's true. We aren't just one thing. Most of us have many different aspects of our lives, and leadership is a big part of it. So thank you for that. Okay. For imposter syndrome, which is a term I feel like we hear fairly frequently, but people define it in different ways. I sort of have my idea of what it is, but tell us from your perspective and your experience, how you define imposter syndrome.
I see imposter syndrome as that feeling of, it's a feeling like you're a fraud, like you've gotten to this position, this place of status or leadership or high achievement, through luck, through good timing. You believe that the recognition that you're getting is really due to a lot of other things that don't have to do with your own talent. You don't give yourself the recognition you deserve or own the talents and as I like to say, the special sauce that you bring to the table. And it leads to a lot of fear that you're going to get found out, right? People are going to find out that you're not all you're cracked up to be.
Yeah, I think that's a definition that a lot of my clients and our listeners can certainly relate to. I think about it too, and what I see in clients that talk about imposter syndrome, or at least some aspects of that definition, are it keeps us playing small.
Yeah.
It almost like, I think about the visual of almost like putting your arms around yourself and protecting yourself and keeping yourself safe.
That's so interesting. I do think it definitely keeps us playing small, because if we take those risks, well, especially, a lot of perfectionists have imposter syndrome. And that idea of, if it's not flawless, then it doesn't feel like a success. And so there's a lack of a willingness to put yourself out there and try, which definitely keeps you playing small. But it's funny, the idea of it keeping you safe. It might, I suppose. I never really thought about it that way. I guess it keeps you safe, quote, safe from failure, right? In one respect. Although I will say, a lot of the people that I know that I work with who have imposter syndrome, it's not that they tend to not go after the thing. It's that once they get the thing, they're terrified that they're not going to be able to live up to it, right? They get the job. I'm not going to be able to deliver. They get the promotion. I didn't really deserve it. They're going to find out I didn't really deserve it. They sell a book and well, I don't know. That's a terrible example, maybe, because I can't think of one for that. But, there's just this idea of, I've gotten here, but oh my gosh, I don't belong here. It was all luck that got me here. I don't have the skills. I don't have the talent, and I'm going to get found out. And sometimes that will keep people playing small to get to the next level, or it will keep them, they're on the brink, but then they bring themselves back. Who am I to do that? Who am I to be, to actually achieve that or get that?
Yeah, that's, it's so funny, because while you were just saying that about this feeling that if you achieve the thing, now I'm going to get found out and whatever, I just realized just today, I had a blog post that went out that talked about the fear of success can hold you back as much as the fear of failure. It's just so interesting that hit on the same day. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
absolutely.
Do you think that imposter syndrome is more common in women?
It's interesting you asked that. I think these days there are more men who are discovering imposter syndrome, but I do think it presents much more commonly in women. And the reason for that is that, there's a couple different reasons. Women have been taught throughout the years, not to be too braggy, not to get too big for their britches. It's not ladylike to talk about yourself. And that has resulted in an inability for women to really own their accomplishments and see their true gifts. One of the things I often run into with my clients when I ask them their strengths, women really struggle to answer that question, but they don't struggle to, tell me what's in the way. But strengths is a hard thing for them to own. And I do think that's due to this mentality that women are supposed to be more demure, right? And then there's I think that's part of our patriarchal society, which has also told women for years and years and years. And yes, it's changed now, but for so many years, women's value was in taking care of others. That was really our currency in life. We could not hold a job. We could not have a credit card. We could not have a bank account. We couldn't vote. We couldn't own land. And while that sounds kind of crazy, like it was so many years ago, the thing is, believe it or not, that mentality gets passed down from generation to generation in our DNA. It's actually part of our makeup. And so it has a natural tendency, there's a natural tendency for women to think that their value is in taking care of others, and and that they need the approval of others to say, yes, I add value. So naturally, without somebody else, it's interesting. I mean, there's a little bit of a juxtaposition here, because even, I guess, if you're getting the promotion, someone's saying you have value, but because women don't tend to see what's what's working for them, because they don't want to get too big for their britches. It's hard for them to see, hey, I did X, Y, and Z, and that's why I'm here.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's just not giving themselves enough credit for their accomplishments because they're not used to thinking about it that way. It's interesting. Yep. So what you said about it sort of being baked into our DNA is fascinating. Are there traits, are there attributes that you see that sort of predispose people to imposter syndrome or make it more likely?
So, I mean, I think there are a few traits that are most common in people that tend to suffer from imposter syndrome. I don't think they're necessarily only traits that women have, but I do think, again, they tend to lean more towards women, like perfectionism, like we spoke about before. That idea of it has to be perfect or it's not a success, right? Or really always looking at something that might be an accomplishment and might have been excellent, but they'll pick out what didn't work, because it wasn't, quote, perfect. There's another trait, which is something that's shifted immensely these days, thank goodness, and a lot of schools are teaching differently, is the idea of a fixed mindset. Carol Dweck, who is an incredible professor at Columbia, wrote this book called Mindset, about growth mindset. But I know when I grew up, it was kind of this mentality of if I'm not good at it, then if I'm not good at it right away, then I'm not even going to try. Right. So like, instead of not doing well on a test, looking where I didn't do well and then working to get better at it, it's just, I'm not good at math. Whereas today they're teaching kids, I'm not good at it yet. Or if I work hard on this, I'll get better. That was not how our generation and most generations prior were taught to think. It was, you looked at your natural talents. And so we learned to only do the things we were good at, which, especially like when you're starting a new job and there are things you don't know, that's, of course there are going to be a lot of things you don't know. That's a huge time where imposter syndrome will pop up. People panic because there are things they don't know. So that fixed mindset is definitely a trait of people that tend towards imposter syndrome. Constant comparison, looking around you at how everybody else is doing it and how, what they're saying, what they're doing, rather than kind of keeping your eyes in your own lane and knowing what your intentions are and your goals and going after them. And people pleasing. Because if you're always trying to take care of what somebody else wants, instead of just taking care of the job at hand, it's very easy to get sidetracked and veer off course and think, oh gosh, if I do it this way, this one's not going to be happy. If I do it this way, this one's not going to be happy. And that goes hand in hand with a lack of boundaries.
This is so interesting, all the things that you're saying, and it's bringing up so many things about, our need for perfection. And, I try in my own business to really focus on progress, not perfection, because it holds us back so much. In thinking about a lot of my listeners, Michelle, they are leaders. And what you're talking about with imposter syndrome being so pervasive, and it may be especially important for people who are trying something new. What should leaders be aware of in terms of, the teams they lead, the people that they influence, and sort of moderating for that imposter syndrome that may be there?
You mean from their employees or their team?
Yeah, because it just occurred to me when you were saying that if people are trying something new, that may come up for us. There may be things that we as leaders can do to help people get over that.
Sure. So I think there's a few different things that leaders can do to help to alleviate that within their culture. One of them is really leaving room for different voices. Having critical conversations around decision making rather than just kind of dictating, this is how I want it, go do it. But, really allowing a conversation, getting curious with your team around their thoughts on things. So creating a culture where everybody's voice matters, where you actually allow, whether or not you actually implement all the ideas doesn't matter. Giving people the opportunity to voice their ideas, to have a conversation. First of all, you have no idea where that's going to lead you. It could blow the roof off of something and give you an idea that's way better than what you initially had. But also it just gives your people the sense that the feeling that their voice matters, their ideas matter, their thoughts matter, that you're listening to them and you're interested in what they have to say. The other thing that's important, I think, is hiring within people's zone of genius. So there's different schools of thought on this, but I think it's all, hiring people and then acknowledging where they have talents and owning that you don't, because none of us are good at everything. So knowing as a leader, this is where my deficits are. I'm going to hire people that are really good at that. And then I'm going to trust them. Also, leaving room for mistakes, admitting when you've made them yourself, allowing for failure as a growth opportunity rather than a problem within your organization.
I think the things you're saying are so important. And I know from my previous corporate career, seeing it a lot, and it brought to mind a client of mine now who is such a good leader. And I don't get to see her in action, but I hear the reflections and how she processes it. And she is willing to make a mistake. She is willing to sort of think out loud and have people follow her thought process. And it may lead somewhere or it doesn't, and that's okay. I think she really models that perfect isn't what we're after here.
Yeah.
So beautifully for her team. I love what you're saying.
The other thing, that I was thinking about, this is one of the ways that I always talk to my clients about overcoming imposter syndrome. And I was trying to think about if there's a way for a leader to kind of implement it. And one of the things I often recommend for my clients is that they either keep like a running list on their phone or like a mason jar with little pieces of paper of the things that they've done really well, of their accomplishments. It's important to acknowledge your successes. And especially, we have a tendency to hold on to the things we've done wrong much more easily than we hold on to our accomplishments. So it's important to have those reminders. And I was just thinking, is there a way that a leader could implement that for their team in some way? And maybe it's starting certain meetings with wins. I don't know. Acknowledgement. That said, external validation rarely solves imposter syndrome.
Really?
Well, yeah. I mean, the thing is, here's really what needs to happen is it's really about doing mindset work and working on the thoughts that you have in your head. Because you can tell someone they're great till the cows come home, but then they're going to go home and focus on what they didn't do right and be scared that tomorrow you're going to realize that. That's real. So, ultimately, it's twofold. First of all, bad news, imposter syndrome never goes away completely. Because even if you do the work and you do shift your mindset and every time you go after something new in your life, something bigger, if we're playing bigger, if we're taking risks, when that next level happens, you feel like, oh crap. It's like, now how I have to actually execute on this. And there's always that sinking feeling. That sinking feeling will never go away completely. But having the ability to recognize that that's just a part of yourself and to start to really get to know those self-doubting voices, the voices of the inner critic, so that you have awareness around them, to be able to recognize that as a part of you, but not have it be the only part of you that you're listening to. Again, those voices will never go away, but learning to work with them so that they don't stop you or hold you back or debilitate you or even abuse you, to tell you that you're not good enough. Who do you think you are? Things we would never say to anybody else we care about or love. Those are the things that we're saying to ourselves. We're beating ourselves up and putting ourselves down consistently. So to be able to start to recognize that voice, separate from it, and also start to hear the other voices in your head, because there's also that part of you that knows, that's proud of you for being where you are and doing what you're doing. And you went after it because you wanted it. Now you're just scared.
Yeah, I love what you're saying, because it's true. There are multiple voices, things that we're telling ourselves, and it's what we're tapping into, what we're listening to. It's easiest to believe the stuff that we're not doing as well. And there's something almost comforting for me that you're saying it never entirely goes away. And I'm almost surprising myself by hearing that, because I feel like for some people that self-criticism or striving for more can be really motivating and can have helped create some of the success that they've had. So it almost could feel threatening that, wait a minute, that's going to go away completely. It's maybe a matter of balancing things better.
Sure. And it's true that voice is motivating for a lot of high achieving people. However, here's the thing. At what cost? Different people have different, there are people whose voices are literally abusive, are nasty and mean and say, you're so stupid. How could you have done that? And say terrible things to them. Some people's are milder and, or do it in a more subtle, sneaky way. But the truth is, at the end of the day, do you get motivated by your boss screaming at you? Or do you get motivated by your boss giving you constructive feedback? There's a difference between judgment and discernment. And if we're really being honest, we're smart enough to know if there's something we really need to look at and that we really did wrong, hopefully we're taking responsibility for that. There's a difference between that and beating yourself up to get to the finish line or to do better. There are other ways to achieve that are they're actually going to get you there in a way that is going to serve you and those around you in a much better way. Because if you're judging yourself in that way, you're probably judging a lot of other people around you in that way as well.
Wow. Yeah. But to your point earlier, maybe yourself first, or most harshly, because what you said about we would never speak to someone else that we cared about the way we sometimes speak to ourselves.
No.
That's pretty powerful.
Yes, that's very true. However, Randi, the really interesting thing is you probably won't say the judgments that you have about others out loud. They'll be internal in your head, but they will affect you in relationship with them. And so what I find is, and this is more true of work, not necessarily, it could be true in family relationships as well, but when you can find, and you mentioned the art of compassionate command, when you can find compassion for yourself, your ability to have compassion for others is expanded immensely as well.
Yeah. Yeah. It strikes me, and I have a bias this way because, I'm a coach. It's what I do. It's talking to clients all the time. And I know how much more powerful these insights are for me personally, talking them through.
Yeah.
So, assuming that this message has resonated for our listeners, how can they get in touch with you if they want to either talk to you or hear more about your work?
So the best place to find me is through my website, which is michellepollack.com. And there's a place they can go there. And if they want to chat with me, they can reach out for a call. They can read more about what I do and the kinds of people I work with. And you can also follow me on Instagram, where I'm dropping all sorts of truth bombs and in your face, realities about life that people might not want to hear all the time, but are important too.
And I get those a couple times a week when you drop them, and actually it's a lot of food for thought. So I encourage the listeners to do that. I'll make sure that your website and your Instagram handle are in the show notes so people can find you. Do you have any kind of a tool or anything that you like to offer?
As a matter of fact, I have one that relates directly to our conversation today.
What a coincidence.
Because inner critic is really such it is the first step. Acknowledging and recognizing inner critic is the first step in any kind of personal development work. The way we speak to ourselves is so important as we're working on growing and working on, playing bigger in the world. So I have a tool called Cultivating Confidence. And it's a worksheet to help you really get to know that inner critic voice and teaches you how to work with it.
Great. And that's on your website as well?
That's on my website as well.
Perfect. Well, I appreciate you making that available. Thank you so much for joining us today. I really enjoyed the conversation, as I knew I would. And I feel like you've shared some really, not just thought-provoking aspects of imposter syndrome, but some tips that people can walk away with and hopefully apply. So again, thank you for joining us.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me, Randy.
Thanks so much for listening to Fulfilling Career Happy Life. If you enjoy the show, please subscribe, follow, rate, and review. Do all the things to show your support for this podcast. It helps other professionals who want to feel more energized about their work again find us. And if you want to take this thinking further, please follow me on LinkedIn, where I share content on a regular basis. You can also get on my email list by downloading the Career Satisfaction Assessment or through my website. All these links are in the show notes. Thanks again for tuning in. I truly appreciate that you make the time for yourself to listen to the show. See you next week.